My name is Julia Wallace. I have been an anti-racist activist. I'm a founding member of Left Voice, and I've been a Trotskyist for 2 decades. I grew up in a working class Black neighborhood in Los Angeles, and my mother was a teacher at the Freedom Schools with the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Like so many Black people in the US, I have experienced and faced racism and violence at the hands of police. And today I am so inspired to see so many Black youth in the streets, along with millions of others, against police brutality and systemic racism. For the past 100 days, there have been demonstrations in 2,500 cities and towns across the world and the US. They've been led by Black and brown precarious youth. They've declared slogans like Black Lives Matter and abolish the police. They've been unrelenting in challenging the racism of this system and the corrupt police. The police have been a racist, corrupt, murderous, occupying force in Black communities. They have tortured, beaten, and killed Black and brown youth. They have humiliated and attacked trans youth. They've attacked disabled and elderly and homeless youth as well, including Derek Chauvin, the racist, sadistic cop who grinned as he murdered George Floyd, suffocating him to death in broad daylight for all the world to see. He thought he could get away with it. Instead, there's been a fury that's been unleashed. People have exploded, not only against the police in Minneapolis, but against the police of the world. Relics of slavery have been torn down in front of crowds of cheering youth. Police precincts have been razed, cop cars burned, stores like Target burned with massive support. City blocks and streets have been taken over and occupied. The murder of George Floyd unleashed a fury that hasn't been seen in decades against not only the murder of George Floyd, but against the pandemic and the economic crisis, all of which capitalism cannot resolve. The police cannot be reformed. US capitalism is racist to its core because it was founded on slavery, trafficking and kidnapping African labor for the benefits of the cotton industry to benefit the largest industry, the English industry. As Marx said, without slavery, there would be no cotton. Without cotton, there would be no modern industry. From the country's beginnings, the American capitalists and slave owners took every measure they could to keep the working classes divided and from rising up together. From the creation of slave patrols to police, to institutionalizing racism in their laws. They brutalized and exploited Black enslaved workers. Black people toiled in the fields, making US capitalists and slave owners rich. When slavery was abolished, they created Jim Crow. When Jim Crow was undermined by the civil rights movement, they created other laws to marginalize and attack Black people. This meant that the police served a purpose to attack Black people and maintain private property. White workers were paid for their compliance and privileges and intimidated by those same enforcers if they resisted. The goal of the capitalists was to prevent the poor and exploited and other oppressed people from coming together. Even today, Black people are paid less than whites for the same work, have higher rates of unemployment and homelessness, and are disproportionately killed by police. Racism permeates every aspect of society. Still, there are numerous examples of Black and white and other ethnicities fighting together against racism. The multi-ethnic struggle happening today is the worst nightmare for the American bourgeoisie. Both the Democrats and Republicans aim to quell this movement, but have different strategies. The Republicans under Trump have openly embraced white supremacists with the most violent and bigoted rhetoric. Trump called on the National Guard and military to put down the protests. He threatened, if they start looting, we'll start shooting. quoting a racist police chief from the civil rights era. Instead, the protesters got even more bold, forcing Trump to retreat into his bunker like the coward that he is. His rhetoric still emboldens white supremacists who have continued to attack and murder protesters along with the police. The strategy of the Democrats, on the other hand, has been pandering and co-optation, trying to disguise their years of attacks on the Black community. The Democrats have helped facilitate massive rates of incarceration, gentrification, and have protected murderous police, like Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd. In both the Clinton and Obama administrations, Black people have suffered unprecedented evictions and foreclosures and attacks. Now, Democrats kneeling on the floor of Congress, draped in kente cloth, claim to support the movement. Meanwhile, as night falls, they drop tear gas on the protesters and beat them in the streets. Presidential hopeful and former Vice President Joe Biden said to the Black Lives Matter movement, the police should shoot Black people in the leg rather than the heart. What a racist clown. This is who the union bureaucracy, NGOs, and nonprofits are gearing up to campaign for? We will not be bought off by weak concessions to endorse our own oppression. Neither capitalist party can resolve the issues of the crisis, systemic racism, or police brutality. To end systemic racism and police brutality, we need a strategy for liberation. We need a strategy that fights both capitalism and the police who defend them. That's how we get free, by organizing ourselves as the working class. As the coronavirus pandemic has shown us, the bosses are not essential. The working class is essential. Workers can halt the wheels of capitalism, but more than that, workers can organize all of production and reproduction in the services of all of our lives instead of their profits. Workers, both unionized and precarious, can organize and fight back against racism at our workplaces and communities and against the exploitation of the bosses. We also need to fight the union bureaucracy, who is refusing to mobilize our ranks to protect our jobs and to defend us against the austerity being imposed by both the Democrat and Republican parties. We, the working class and oppressed, need a party independent of the capitalists and imperialists, with no cops, bosses, or bigots as members. We must organize ourselves politically in the streets and workplaces and build a party that represents our interests. Building a revolutionary party in the world's largest imperialist power is an enormous task, but it would be a historic challenge with historic consequences. This challenge is inseparable from building an international party of the working class, which for us is the Fourth International. That's how Trotsky and the American Trotskyists of the original Socialist Workers' Party at the end of the 1930s had envisioned. Our organization, the Trotskyist Fraction, our website network of La Izquierda Diario, published in 14 different countries, takes up this internationalist challenge. We agree with Leon Trotsky, who laid down the basic strategy of overthrowing capitalism and building socialism on a global scale. We invite all the youth in the streets, Black and brown activists fighting police brutality, socialists, and workers rising up against capitalism to rebuild with us the Fourth International. Racism is the enemy of the working class, and violent police are a key component to capitalist exploitation. We must destroy capitalism and abolish the police with international proletarian solidarity and militancy. We continue the struggle for the revolutionaries who came before us and build towards a socialist future. So let the capitalists tremble, because they should be scared, because we will stop at nothing less than a complete end to bigotry, police, racism, capitalism, and imperialism, for an international socialist revolution of the working class and oppressed. As Karl Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto, and Assata Shakur, a Black revolutionary, wrote in her pledge, we have nothing to lose but our chains, and we have a world to win.